Hello, good evening. Welcome. My name is Diana Vega, and I am the Civic Engagement Coordinator for DC Public Library. And we want to welcome you to what is going to be a great event. We have an author talk with Marita Golden on her new book, The Strong Black Woman: How a Myth Endangers the Physical and Mental Health of Black Women. And she will be in conversation with Dr. Pamela Brewer. And so this is Mental Illness Awareness Week. Today is actually National Depression Screening Day. And so we know that this is a very important discussion that we need to have. And so we're so excited to have both Marita and Dr. Brewer here. Before I bring Marita up, I just want to give you brief introductions about both of our guests today. Marita Golden is the author of 19 works of fiction and nonfiction. Her books include the novels The Wide Circumference of Love, After, and The Edge of Heaven, and the memoirs Migrations of the Heart, Saving Our Sons and Don't Play in the Sun, One Woman's Journey Through the Color Complex, and the anthology which she edited, Us Against Alzheimer's, Stories of Family, Love, and Faith. Her most recent work of nonfiction is The Strong Black Woman: How a Myth Endangers the Physical and Mental Health of Black Women. She is a recipient of many awards, including the Writers Award presented by Barnes and Noble and Poets and Writers, an award from the Authors Guild, and the Fiction Award for her novel After, awarded by the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. She has lectured and read from her work internationally. She's a co-founder and president emeritus of the Zohar Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation and is a veteran teacher of writing. As a teacher of writing, she has served as a member of faculties of the MFA Graduate Creative Writing Programs at George Mason University and Virginia Commonwealth University. She has served as a distinguished writer in residence at the University of the District of Columbia. As a literary consultant, she offers writing workshops, coaching, and manuscript evaluations. And she was my workshop leader at the Hurston Wright Foundation. I'm forever grateful for her mentorship. That's just a personal note that I want to share. And we also want to welcome Dr. Pamela Brewer, a psychotherapist for 30 plus years, who is now specializing in telehealth services only. Dr. Brewer is also the host of My ND Talk with Dr. Pamela Brewer, a newly reconstituted half-hour relationship and mental health program currently airing on YouTube and more sites to come. And I will put their personal website links in the chat. So we want to welcome both Marita and Dr. Pamela Brewer. We're so excited. I'm going to bring Marita up onto the screen. Hello. Thank you so much
Hi,
for
Diana.
joining us.
Thank you for hosting me again. I can always count on the DC Public Library.
Yes, we're so glad to see you. Because I mean, you're a native Washingtonian, so you need to be here
Yes.
anyway. So
And
we're
congratulations on the new libraries, and especially
thank
the new main library.
yes, thank you. Yes, you all come to MLK if you have not been. So I'm going to turn it over now to Marina. She's going to read from The Strong Black Woman, and then we will bring Dr. Brewer into the conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, once again, thank you, Diana, for hosting me, for inviting me. And I'm really glad to be on this program with Dr. Pamela Brewer. She and I have known each other for quite a long time, and she's one of the several health experts, mental health experts that I interviewed for my book, The Strong Black Woman. And we're going to talk about a number of things, and I really hope we have a very lively discussion during the question and answer period. The Strong Black Woman. This is my pandemic book. I think a lot of us had projects that we found ourselves working on during the lockdown period, and this was my project. It's a book that I was inspired to write after I learned that despite a lifetime of doing everything right, eating right, diet, exercise, I had had sometime in the distant past two silent strokes. I have a history in my family of stroke and heart attack, and I go to the doctor religiously, but I'd had two silent strokes. And my image of myself as a strong Black woman was so strong that I was deeply affected by this knowledge, even though silent strokes are actually quite common. And I began to think about Black women in general and our health, and the fact that we're currently in the midst of a really important, very vigorous conversation, public, private, about Black women, about strength, and about our mental health. Of course, it was exacerbated and probably inspired a lot by the events of the last year, as well as Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, and even Serena Williams witnessing to the fact that it is possible to ask Black women to be too strong. This is a book that's about the things we carry. It's about the masks we wear. And first, before I read a few sections from the book, I want to kind of talk about the Strong Black Woman Complex. Those of you who are in the audience who are African American, who are Black women, you know what the Strong Black Woman Complex is. It's being raised and being told, stop crying before I give you something to cry about. You have to be twice as good. You have to take care of yourself. You can't depend on anyone. You don't need a man. You can do bad by yourself. And all of these kinds of sayings are meant to make us strong, to make us be independent. And that they do. But we are now beginning to see that so much of the Strong Black Woman Complex that asks Black women to deprioritize self-care is really killing us. And Dr. Brewer and I will talk about that more. When we say the Strong Black Woman Complex, we're talking about a set of beliefs that require Black women to be strong in all situations, to be almost invincible, and to tap down their pain, and to shoulder their families, to shoulder the race. Now, the Black woman complex is rooted, of course, to some extent in our slave past. We had to be strong. We were told that we were strong like animals, in fact. And we did what oppressed groups often do. That is, we took the words or the language that was meant to damn us or to marginalize us or to demean us, and we turned it into something that we could use to inspire us, to lift us. And so culturally, we've developed over generations the idea that Black women are strong in the face of anything. So if you say, I'm going to be strong in slavery, well, once I am not enslaved, I can be strong no matter what you throw at me. The problem, of course, of being strong all the time is that you pay a very, very heavy price for it. And we are perennially, perpetually assaulted by systemic racism, which becomes a stress factor in our bodies. And it's like blood, it's like DNA, it's like cells. And all of the stress of systemic racism makes it harder for us to be healthy, to stay healthy, to lose weight. All of the things that we need to be able to do in our bodies are corrupted, are sabotaged, in fact, by the impact of systemic racism. Systemic racism, example, my son gets a driver's license, and I'm so happy that now he can drive, but I'm very worried that he may be pulled over by a bad cop. I'm applying for a second mortgage on my house, and I have excellent credit, but there's this delay, can't figure out what's happening. And then the mortgage officer calls us and says, well, what's happening is the white officers in the office are delaying this, are putting roadblocks, stress. So these are the kinds of things that are just woven into the fabric of our lives as Black people. And unless we have systems and practices in place that allow us to diffuse the buildup of that kind of tension, it really can very, very negatively impact our health. So we're talking about the Strong Black Complex and needing to redefine what we mean by strength. And I'm so glad that I'm part of what is a multi-generational conversation. If you're following the conversation in magazines, journals, on social media, you will see that Black women of all ages, all life experiences are deconstructing the Strong Black Woman Complex and saying that they need a space to be vulnerable, they need a space where they can ask for help. So this is a book that very much like my book, Don't Play in the Sun, and my book, Saving Our Sons, is a communal memoir, one in which I wrap my story around the stories of others. So in the book, I write about my journey from strong Black woman to new age strong Black woman. I interview other Black women. I talk to health activists. Um, I talk to mental health experts. And I write a series of essays that meditate on various aspects of Black female mental health. So I'm going to read a couple of small sections from the book and then get into the discussion with Dr. Brewer. This is from the beginning of the book, and I'm writing about sort of the meaning of the strong Black woman complex as well as its legacy. Our bodies, souls, and spirits are a map, a testimony to the ravages of our enslavement, the cruel legacy of legal segregation and lack of access to wealth, good employment, stable housing, and good health care. And our psyches have been twisted and turned inside out by the stories we tell ourselves and the stories that are told about us. Stories that have sometimes saved and sometimes sabotaged us. The strong Black woman, the angry Black woman, the Black woman who says yes to everyone but herself. The invincible superwoman. We've had to be strong. We've had good reason to be angry. We say yes over and over to our families because the world so often tells them no. I was 21 years old and my mother was dying. She lay comatose in a bed in a rehabilitation center for 6 months, wasting away before my eyes. I was a raise the Black Power fist, Afro-wearing militant activist and B+ average student attending American University, and I had already started wearing the mask, the strong Black woman mask. I was 21 and already I was a strong Black woman. Being a strong Black woman meant that you handled your business. You did what you had to do no matter what. My mother was dying, but I had to continue to be a successful student. Being a strong Black woman meant that you didn't bother others unnecessarily with your pain. In the small apartment where I lived with my mother, my nights were sleepless, tear-filled meltdowns in which in the dark I whispered, shouted, and screamed the questions I was terrified to ask in the light of day. Why would I soon be a motherless child? How would I go on? I'd rarely seen my mother cry. Maybe she too cried in the dark. How I wish she had cried in the light. Despite all that she'd made of her life after her arrival in Washington, D.C., as part of the great migration of African Americans from the South, there was a lot she could have cried about. One of the most satisfying aspects of the research I did for the book was talking to African American women about the strong Black woman complex and how it affected their lives. Usually I would start the conversation by simply asking, who were the strong women in your life? Who taught you to be a strong woman, a strong Black woman? And I was especially looking for women who had transformed pain into healing, some of them through therapy, some of them through other practices, because I wanted to model in the book that there's no reason to be fearful of getting mental health support. And one of the stories in the book is told by a young woman who grew up in a family that was affected by alcoholism and physical abuse between her parents. And she was relied on by her parents for an enormous amount of strength. And she talked about how she learned to put herself first. And I'm just going to read a little bit from her story. No doubt we were jacked up. We were a mess. But our church was where we all came together, no matter what. I remember when I was 10 years old one Sunday, I went up to the sanctuary and a woman prayed over me. She affirmed my purpose and what God had in store for me. I'll never forget that. The memory of that woman's hands kept pushing me through everything. That and the family prayer line that my mother's side of the family set up and that I'm still a part of. My own faith, my mother's faith, all that got me through everything. And everything included while in college being the family breadwinner, using her scholarship money to buy food and pay household bills. Everything included watching her parents' 36-year marriage end, but because endings are rarely neat, seeing bitterness and distance and quarrels still erupt. Because by then I was deeply into the superwoman, the strong Black woman syndrome, all of this was mine to carry, Jamie said. But at 19, she took the first of many steps to lay her burden down. Prayer led me to counseling. She went into counseling for adult children of alcoholics. All my life, I'd been told not to share our business, but prayer helped me realize it was okay to seek professional counseling outside the church. She found faith to endure and overcome in church, but in group counseling, she could hear and see through the din and the fog of her life at home. She began to put the pieces together like a puzzle. Her father told her, "Stand up for yourself. Don't let white people keep you down." But that warning was followed by the accusation that she talked too much and had a smart mouth. Her mother said, "Be proud. Be a proud Black woman. Be strong. I love you. But don't tell anybody our business. Tell me what you feel. I need you. You can handle this. You're the first one I call, one I can always depend on." Jamie was crumbling beneath the burden. But in group therapy, that was one place where she could be herself, something she was still discovering. Jamie was crumbling beneath the burden and had what she would call the first honest conversation with her parents. I told them, "I can't carry you. I can't carry my anger. I can't carry my hurt." She set boundaries and put herself first. I wasn't protected as a child, but now I was ready to protect myself. I told them, "I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad, but I release you. I choose me." And in choosing herself, she could see herself as a woman she now made time and space to become, a journalist, an activist for women's rights, and she will always say, a believer. I think this is a good point to segue into the conversation with Dr. Brewer.
Hello, Marita. I'm so delighted to be here with you.
And I'm so delighted that you're here with me too. And I want to thank you as well for helping me with the book. Your wisdom was just so meaningful. And we talked about grief, which I'll get to in a minute. And so many of the things you said about grief were so important. Because this is a time of grieving for us. As a community, we've paid a terrible price for COVID. We've been deeply affected by it, even if we're healthy. I was talking to one of the women in the book who I interviewed a couple of days ago, and she informed me that her fiance at the age of 33 had died of a heart attack during COVID. He had symptoms, went to the hospital, and because the hospital was all over with COVID, they sent him home. 2 days later, on the way to the hospital, he dies in the car of a heart attack. So this has been an extremely difficult time for us. So I wanted to ask you, what do you see with your clients as in terms of the Strong Black Woman Complex? How does it play out in their lives negatively?
Well, certainly what you described earlier on is what I see in my practice. Their sense that they have to do everything, be everywhere, know everything, take care of everybody. And for some of them, the only outlet that they were given permission to pursue was church. And even in church, they weren't supposed to, again, it's exactly what you've talked about. They weren't supposed to say too much. So now, as I talk to my clients, some of whom have full families, feeling very much that they need to take care of their adult families as well as their growing families, and they very quickly and can very profoundly get lost in the middle of all of that, and then blame themselves for being exhausted and tired and grouchy and not having time for themselves, and feel guilty if they want to say, "Can I have 10 minutes in the shower instead
Yes.
of 2?"
Yes. I talked to Dr. Kanika Bell, who's interviewed in the book, and she said, look, women will come to me in therapy, women who do yoga, women who are supposed to have it all together, and their phone is ringing.
Mhm.
they can't put their phone down. They will reveal something to me that's very meaningful to them, and they will say, "Am I allowed to say that?"
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much grief in that. You have a sense of who you are and how you feel, but then again, you're not supposed to really say it out loud, and sometimes not even feel it. And so, am I allowed to say it goes along with, am I allowed to feel it?
Mhm.
Is this feeling okay? Is there something wrong with me because I feel fill in the blanks, angry, exhausted, overwhelmed, like I just don't want to be bothered today? I'm not supposed to feel that. I hear that a great deal.
Yeah. I had a conversation recently with a 10-year-old girl, and I was talking with her about the death of her father. And we were talking about the aftermath. And I said, I know this is a really hard time for you. And I know you've probably cried a lot. And she said, I can't cry. I'm holding it in.
Mhm,
And she's 10 years old and
mhm,
already has learned from all the signals around her that she has to hold in. And Black women are so busy working that they don't have time to cry. I mean, I had a conversation with a woman who works in a doctor's office recently who told me that we got to talking about health. How have you been? Blah, blah, blah.
mhm,
And she said that she had just found out from her doctor that she was pre diabetic and
mhm.
she needed to go on high blood pressure pills. So I said, well, I've been on high blood pressure medication for, God, only over a decade. She said, Marita, I hadn't been to a doctor since 2011.
Oh my.
And when I told one of the other doctors that I talked to for this book, she said, oh, I'm not surprised. So what we do is we wait until the very last minute.
Right. Right. And any steps to engage in self-care for Black women in particular is often seen as it's not okay. You don't have time for it. I do a lot of work with victims of sexual violence, of domestic violence, and particularly for the Black women, one of their challenges is, well, I really shouldn't say anything because fill in the blanks. What about the Black race? What about the Black man? How's he going to be treated? What are people going to think about him? Maybe it was my fault. And so, for Black women in particular, when you're taught that everything is your responsibility, it's kind of easy to slide over into everything being your fault and then blaming yourself for the pain that you're in.
Definitely, definitely. COVID, this COVID period that we're in, that has been so difficult. And yet, one of the good things that did come out of it is the emphasis on mental health.
Yes.
We paid a big price to get to this place, even though many activists and writers have been doing the work before, but we're at a watershed moment. And how are you for example, I saw that during COVID, more people were going back into therapy and more people
Yeah.
were going to therapy for the first time. What are you seeing?
Um, for my clients, certainly they've been in therapy off and on for a while. And for some of them, didn't see COVID as the thing that was stressful. What was stressful was the ongoing, how do I make the money? If it's a single parent, are my hours going to be affected? For people who were newly coming into therapy, particularly for women of color, for Black women, it was, I'm not sure that I have the time. I don't think I should spend the time on me. There's so much stuff that needs to be done. Is this okay? It's not okay. And really, even as was said earlier, my work now is 100% telemental health. So it's all online. So even my request that they find a space in their home that was just for them, that was quiet, that was secure, nobody would bother them,
Mhm.
was huge. How can they do that? How can they be unavailable to the people in the house
Yes, yes,
for
yes, yes, yes,
45, 50 minutes?
yes,
It's profound, and unfortunately it's not new.
yes, yes. Well, I'm completely the other extreme. I do days of silence where I wake up and my husband prefers that I do it the night before. He says, look, you need to give me 24 hours notice. So if you're going to be silent tomorrow, you need to tell me the night before. Where I will be silent. I used to go before COVID, I went on silent retreats. Sometimes I'll check into a hotel. There's this great thing now where you can check into a hotel from 8 to 4, from 10 to 4. And I have developed the habit over many years of nurturing my soul, quieting the den. And I think that's one of the
So
real
important.
challenges that Black women have in just say hello to you. Say hello to the you that has nothing to do with anybody else. And go for a walk. Just go for a walk. So and I think that this is going to be a generational conversation.
Absolutely.
Now that we've got the new language, we change from color to Negro to Black to African American. We can change from strong Black women to new strong Black women.
Well, and for some people, for Black folks in particular, strong has meant silent. And that's not strength. I mean, that is such a burden. But it's a catch-22, because on the one hand, if we say everything that we're feeling, right, I don't even have to go there.
Exactly.
On the other hand, if you keep it all inside, you're burying yourself within yourself, and it's so unfair. It's so exciting to see more people, more women, more of these athletes, more of the people who are in front of the camera saying, I'm human, and therefore my mental health is a part of my being, and I need to pay attention to it. That is really exciting. And of course, very often, even with the athletes that you talked about, when they first come out and say, wait a minute, I need a minute, there's so much pushback. How dare you need a minute? And what I would like to say, you and I talk about it, but what I'd like to say to the folks who are listening is, how dare you not need a minute? How dare you not need an hour or two or a week? Just ongoing, regular time. Make a date with yourself on your calendar that is just for you.
Yes. And I think if I was asked what was the most surprising revelation or discovery that I made during the research, was a study that Dr. Bell, she's a therapist down in Atlanta, did, where she surveyed 50 African-American, African-descended psychologists, therapists, counselors, and their clients, Black female clients, and asked them about questions about contentment, happiness, peace, joy. And the survey revealed that for many Black women don't believe that joy and peace is something that is for Black women. That's for white women, because the pressures of racism negate the relevance, negate the possibility, and negate why would you even do that when the race is on fire? Okay. So that was the most surprising thing that for a lot of Black women. And then I had to check myself and realize that there had been times when I had to work myself out of that same belief. And she said she felt that teaching Black women to celebrate themselves was the main thing that has to happen.
And teaching us, letting us know that we have worth and we have merit as is. So much of our world is about, well, you don't deserve this unless you do that. So the notion, of course, we were taught, as we were, I say, stolen and brought here, we were taught that we had no merit, no worth, and that we just had to work all day in order to be worth anything. And even then, it wasn't quite enough. So for many of the people, depending on their age that I talk to, the idea that they have worth just waking up in the morning, they don't have to prove anything, that they have value as is powerful, overpowering. I can't tell you the number of women who have been tearful with the thought that they don't have to work to be acceptable, that we are acceptable as is. It's, again, I'm glad that we're moving away from it, but it's still so much a part of the culture.
We talked in our interview for the book about grief. I wrote about, I have a chapter called Another Mourning, Mourning, in America. And I wrote about the ways in which so many of the unfortunate mothers who have lost their children in high profile murders have had to publicly perform grief. There's
Right.
a quote from the mother of Yusuf Hawkins,
Mhm.
who back in the 90s was beaten to death by a gang of white boys as he was in a largely white part of New York looking to buy a used car. And it was a very big situation. It was a horrible case. And she said that people kept telling me to stop crying. People kept telling me to stop crying and be quiet.
Right.
And to stop crying when she's lost her son in such a terrible way.
Right.
And in the book, I write about the fact that, for example, the young people that were killed at Stoneman Douglas High School, the shooting there, I guess it was 2 years ago, those families got $400,000 each in reparations for the loss of their child. And yet there's this grinding toll in the Black community. And we never get reparations. And then we're told, move on.
Right.
So, you talked so beautifully about grief and grieving and the ways in which Black women get censored around grieving and have their special rules for our grieving.
Well, first of all, you said we're not supposed to grieve. We don't have a right to grieve. We don't have a time. Grief is a luxury, is what many of us have taught. And it's a luxury that we don't have time for, that we don't own. And the fact is, I'm not sure, how you can be Black in America and not experience some measure of grief every single day. And that doesn't mean that you're under the bed, steeped in depression, although that is one of the elements that can be depression. But, for so many people that I've talked to, Black people, what I say to them is, again, I don't know how you can live in America and be Black and not be depressed on some levels. But we go to work, we go home, we go to school. I think about some of our Black talent who have died, and people have said, oh, but she didn't seem unhappy. Well, no, we don't. Because if we do, then there's something wrong with us.
Right.
We're not allowed to say anything. Oh, she's so pretty. How could, and let's not get into a discussion about appearance among Black women in America. We grieve every day, and we are so used to grieving that it's almost a veil, and sometimes it's thin and sometimes it's not so thin. But we often don't give ourselves permission to recognize that loss. Grief is loss, and look at the losses that we have every single day. And sometimes when we as women in particular experience a loss, we're often taught that wasn't a real loss, or you can get another one, or, as you've said, get over it. You don't have time for this. So we need to give ourselves the space and the permission to understand what's true. And what's true is that we live with loss every day. We don't have to drown in it, although it would be easy to do so. And I would suggest that people with different backgrounds do drown in it very often, but we don't have to drown in it, but we don't have to deny the fact that it exists. And we don't have to deny the fact of our feelings. I often will say to folks who say, well, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be sad. I shouldn't be angry. That's not the question. The question is, why am I? The goal is curiosity. That's the tool. Not I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be is so unfair and untrue.
You talked about sort of the different rules for that is, if you suffered a loss that was, say your child was hit by a car, as opposed to your child dying in a criminal situation. And you talked about the different rules and even how it affects the workplace and how much time you may be given off. Talk a little bit about that.
If your child has been involved, even if it's a drive-by event and your child had nothing to do with it, somehow, your child's Black, maybe you don't really want to talk about that and take time off from work. Oh, please. If your child had an illness, again, there's so many different layers to it. Is it okay for you to be sad that your child was harassed at school? Not so much. I mean, we do better now with bullying, but even with bullying, what's seen as bullying of a Black child is very often seen as, well, that's what they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Years, and I'll tell this story very briefly. Years ago, I was supervising social work students, and we were talking about how to approach clients, and that you should really start where the client is. And I had this one lovely little girl who went into a home and reported that her client's son, I think it was, got a shotgun, put it under his coat, and walked out of the house. And so I asked her what she did about that, and she said, well, nothing, because you told me that I should let the client start where the client is, and don't all Black people have shotguns on them?
Oh my goodness.
Typically, no. And we're certainly not shoving it under the raincoat and walking out the house with a goal to, but I get, it's those kinds of myths that really are myths, but creep into our lives. And of course, people very often treat Black people in particular based on how they think Black people should be versus how, in fact, we really are.
I mean, and we do that to ourselves.
True.
It's not just white people. We have a whole set of rules of Blackness that, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be that. Yeah. And I think this is, go ahead.
I was just going to say, your grief is supposed to be, if you have experienced a moment of grief that the broader society agrees is a grievable moment, you're still supposed to be kind of quiet about it and kind of cool and not burst into tears and not need time off. And, if it's an extended family member in particular, well, that's not your husband or your wife, that's your uncle. Can't you people take care of that? I mean, I've had clients to whom that has been said in the workplace. Don't you people know how to take care of that? You have a job to do. You have to come to work. And depending on, where you grew up and how you grew up, you hear that kind of stuff as a woman, and you think, well, yeah, maybe I should just take care of that. Maybe
but Pam, as we're talking about this, what's going through my head, that stock image in so many Black comedies.
Yes.
Where there's a funeral and the mother or the wife or the daughter goes up to the casket and just falls out and just shows so much pain and anguish. And it's portrayed in a way that's designed to make it laughable.
Right.
But this is the only place where we ever see Black women cry.
Right.
We never see Black women cry any place else but at a funeral. And then when they show real emotion, it's satirized.
That's right.
It's mocked.
In fact, you're absolutely right. And in fact, that's a healthy, you're not at a funeral because you're having a party. You're at a funeral because you're sad. You've lost someone. And to grieve out loud is important. It's valuable. It's healing. This grieve in silence business is just, it's adding grief to the grief.
Definitely. And I think this is all so important because what's happening is all of this is killing us. It is not often stated this way, but we are in the midst of a health emergency in the Black community in so many areas. And Black women lead. The crazy thing about Black women is we're born leaders. Look at Stacey Abrams, save democracy. Look at Sirana. You want something done, give it to a Black woman. But in terms of our health,
but don't pay her for it.
Exactly. But in terms of our health, we're leading in the wrong way.
Right.
We're leading in terms of being the fastest growing group developing Alzheimer's and dementias. We are leading in terms of strokes, heart attacks, cardiac issues. And so that when I say this in the book, that we have this legacy of leadership. So once we get our arms around this health issue, we will tackle it with the fervor and the dedication that we're known for. But we have to realize it is killing us.
Absolutely.
Those 2 silent strokes that I had were silent because despite the fact that my mother had 2 strokes and my father had a heart attack, and they both died when I was 21 and 23, I exercised starting in my 20s. I had a good diet. I meditate. I have friends, and I get my butt into therapy. I've been in therapy 2, 3, 4 times over issues that I could not handle on my own. So when I saw my parents die when I was 21 and 23, I said, "Oh no, not me." So this is very serious. And I think when people hear you say, "Oh, go into your house and find a little," they think that's just some little passive thing. That is major.
It's
Done
active.
regularly, that is
Right.
active. That's like building a muscle.
You know, when I started doing Mind Talk 25 years ago, there wasn't a lot that was being said about mental health. Now, of course, there's so much more, but even, you know, in the beginning of that, not really sure you wanted to call into the program, not really sure you wanted to say what you wanted to say. And, you know, for many people, it's like, we don't need that. We in the Black community do not need that. We don't need this mental health. What is that? What is talking to somebody going to do? What is expressing yourself going to do? And the fact is that not expressing yourself to yourself and to others, that's the thing that's harming you. That's the thing that's killing us, literally.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say that racism, systemic racism, is this oppressive force, and then say you don't need to deal with it.
Right.
You can't have it both ways.
Or you can deal with it, but don't deal with it too much. Don't say too much. Don't talk too much. Don't be too angry. Why not be angry? Why not be exhausted? It's exhausting and it's pervasive.
Yes. I think this is a good point to stop and see if there are any questions or comments from the audience.
Okay.
Hello. You all have excuse me, lots of positive feedback. I will put some of the stuff on the screen. Someone said these are stories that resonate. Mary Apollo said, "Great job. My teacher in writing, Marita Golden, she took your memoir writing class in 2016 at DC Public Library." We have another comment that says, stuff our grandmas couldn't tell us. And can we just pause right there and maybe talk a little bit? Because I think, Marita, you said you asked people in the book who were the strong women, and I feel like people probably said my grandma or my mom. And did they talk about not getting this truth from?
Yes. And they understood why. They understood that when they were children, there wasn't the language as a society to even investigate, much less really talk about this. Oprah Winfrey hadn't come on TV. No, but there wasn't the language. And they look back on their mothers with compassion, but also wishing that they could have seen them cry, that they could have talked to them about other things besides stop crying before I give you something to cry about, clamping down. So and these are women who had, as I said, many of them been through therapy, or they had really examined their lives very deeply. So everybody learned how to be a strong Black woman from their mother. And they learned some good things, and they learned some things that sabotaged them. But they understood that that was inevitable, because this is not our grandmother's world.
Thank you. We have another comment says, yes, Marita Golden was my manuscript consultant and writing guide. Thank you. We have a comment. Thank you, Marita, for your contribution to the complex elements of this ongoing conversation about Black women claiming our humanity. Valerie said, make time for yourself. That has nothing to do with anyone else. Needed to hear and digest that. Felicia's comment, strong has also meant void of any emotion that may be viewed as weak. Can we pause and talk about that?
Yeah, Pamela, you want to take that?
It, one of the things that I often say is that learning to feel your feelings. Can't tell you how many people have said to me, I don't have any feelings about that. Well, yeah, you do have feelings about that.
Yeah.
You know, you're human, you have feelings. Not only is it okay to have feelings, we have feelings, we're human. So the strong, as we said earlier, strong meant silent. And we really need to redefine what we think about as strong. It takes a great deal of strength to say, I need help. It takes a great deal of strength to say, I have a tear and I really want to let it fall. It takes a great deal of strength to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And certainly for women, we have a tendency to say, I'm sorry, but no, I'm not going to do that. And here are the 15 reasons to justify why I'm saying no. Uh, That's not useful. Although strong did mean being devoid of emotion, then there are times and there are places where we have to let ourselves know what we feel. Sometimes with clients, I've even had to send them like a list of words that are related to emotion because they haven't really been taught that it's okay to have them. And there is a huge difference between what you think about something and how you feel about something. And your thoughts and your feelings may not seem like they fit, but they fit inside of you because they're coming from you. So I think it's a great comment. It is true, but it is one of the things that if we deny the fact that we're human and we have feelings, we're denying the fact that we're alive, and that will
Uh,
kill us.
yeah, and at one point in the book, I write about the things we carry and the emotions and the silence, and how important it is for our children to see that sometimes we're confused. We don't know the answer. And I asked my son if he remembered ever seeing me cry. And he said, yes, it was during a time when, as many adolescents will do, he had made a very poor choice. And we were trying to help him get through the results of that poor choice. And I said, well, what did you learn from seeing me cry? He said, I learned that you were my mother, you loved me, but that you couldn't fix everything in my life and that I had to be responsible for what I did. And I think that one of the worst things that the Strong Black Woman Complex does is that it corrupts our relationships with others. It disempowers people when we're always solving problems. It disempowers people and it corrupts the relationship because they never know who we really are.
Well, and it also interferes with even the formation of a relationship because if you're not allowed to see the adults around you or the people you care about have feelings and express them, it gives you the message that you're not supposed to have them either. And for your son to be able to see you cry also reminded him that mom is human and that she really cares. And for so many Black women in particular, as we've been saying, we've been taught that you're not supposed to cry because that's not a thing and it's not useful. It is very useful. It is healing, and it may not change the situation, but it's going to change how you feel in the situation. It's going to change your perspective.
Thank you. Another comment we have was when we were talking about certain rules of blackness, and they said certain rules of blackness is so true and often unhealthy. And I don't know if you want to make any comments
Oh
on.
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I was teaching at a university that will shall not be named. And in a faculty meeting, the chair of the department made a statement that was blatantly sexist and racist, I felt. And I had the Black woman moment where you say, okay, did I enter the room to be silent or did I enter the room to stand on principle? Now, I decided that I was going to say something. Now, I also was tenured, so I was strategic. So when I preached my sermon and preached a eulogy, um, I could do it because as a tenured faculty member, I had kind of a shield around me. But that was a moment when I had to say, am I going to say something? Because it wouldn't have been, it would have demeaned me as a principal person to say what I had to say to him privately. It was important for me to witness publicly in that meeting that if nobody else was concerned, I was. And ironically, I got no support from anybody else in the department. Not a person came up and shook my hand. But that department chair came back to me later and thanked me for setting him straight. So I think that we all have these moments and we have to be strategic. You know, you have to be strategic. Do I have the power to say this and negotiate and figure out? Like when we were talking about saying no, for example, you can say no and you can say, well, you know, I can't do that. But, you know, I'm going to give you one idea how you might do it. So you're saying no, but you're also empowering the person.
Right.
So there are lots of ways to say no, in addition to it just being a complete sentence.
And one of the things that's important to remember about saying no is if you find yourself and you're continually doing everything for some other person or other people, you're continually pulling them out of the soup, if you will. You're teaching them that you don't believe they can do it. You're teaching them that you are all things to all people. You're exhausting yourself, and it doesn't help them at all. At all. Hurts both of you.
We have a comment from Maria Jones who said, yes, Mind Talk was bomb. Please bring it back.
It's back. It's back.
It's back.
Sorry, you have your answer.
And Pamela, you want to tell people how they can see it, or?
Well, right now it's on YouTube and Facebook, and I'm still pulling together all the platforms, but it's a half hour. It is a podcast. It's a video podcast, and it's around. So you can just go to YouTube and type in Mind Talk.
It's not spelled like that, is it?
No, it's MYNDTALK. And the reason for that is because the way we talk to ourselves, my talk to me, is very powerful. And so that's why it's spelled that way. We have to pay attention to what we say to ourselves.
Awesome. Marie also said this conversation is so essential. I have two comments that I'm going to post about grandmothers that come back to back, but my grandmother suffered in silence. Her emotional, mental, and physical health suffered. And then we have another comment. My grandmother had a heart attack and wouldn't tell anyone she was in pain. By the time it was evident to others, she was in congestive heart failure. She had held out for 6 days without a word. She didn't want to cause a problem.
God.
And I guess I was going to ask about, I do feel that as Black women, we kind of try to carry everything or do everything and maybe feel guilt if we let something go, or like you were saying, say no to something, or, you know, or I can't help you, or I can't do that. So can you talk about how Black women can kind of get over that hump, I guess, or to be able to say, I'm going to choose myself?
One of the things about guilt that I often suggest to folks is, what are you guilty of? What's the crime that you committed? Oh, okay, now wait a minute. You couldn't do 5 things at once with just one set of hands. That's the crime. That's absolutely a crime. What's the crime you committed when you said no and when you chose to take care of yourself? So a first best thing to say is, what is the crime I have committed? And maybe the crime you have committed is not a crime. Maybe you made a reasonable choice. We feel guilty about so many things that just are not ours. Somebody else's life is not yours to live, to lift, to carry, to fix, to heal. You can be there, you can be present, but you can't be present if you're killing yourself. And guilt is a absolutely not healthy emotion. And at the risk of repeating myself, what is the real crime that you have committed?
And Black women, studies have shown that Black women will take the responsibility for crimes that they have not committed to save a Black man.
Right. Or keep a crime hidden, such as, and when there's violence, to save the Black man. But it's not saving him. It's definitely not saving her. And it's not saving us as a people.
And it's making a situation where he could victimize someone else.
Likely will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Likely will.
Okay, I have posted Dr. Brewer's YouTube channel in the chat, so everyone should be able to go to that and see Mind Talk, especially if you've been missing it. We have a comment. The first time I saw my mother have an emotional reaction, a mini meltdown, really, she was not aware that I could see and hear her crying. I was an adult, and I remember thinking, wow, my mom is 100% human. That is still a very empowering memory of her, and it helps me in my weak moment.
Oh, yes, that's so important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And again, we need to, just as I said, we need to redefine how we think about the word strength. We really need to define what it is we think about weakness and how we define weakness. Tears are not an example of weakness. Having stress or anger or upset about an injustice, whatever it is, that is not a sign of weakness.
Mm-hmm. And since today is National Depression Screening Day, and my mom is a mental health nurse, and she would say, like, sometimes the screening questions are more for white people's in terms of the way they ask questions. And so can you talk about how depression does show up and maybe the ways that we're coping and not thinking we're depressed, and how to know, like you've been saying, to name your feelings and emotions, but if that is something you're dealing with, then what are the next steps that someone should take?
The signs, if you will, that you're depressed can be many. They can, if you're noticing a change in yourself, if it's a change in your eating and your sleeping, if it's a change in how you want to socialize, if it's a change in your focus or your concentration, those are some of the things that can be indicators that you're depressed. I think I have a blog at my drpamelabrewer.com website, which goes into more of the signs and symptoms of depression. I'll check. If I don't, I will put one up. Again, depression is one of the most common experiences that we have in America today, period, hands down. It is a rare person who is not depressed. One of the myths about depression is that if you're really depressed, you're under the bed, you can't get up, you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. That's not true. There are many levels of depression. It operates along a spectrum. The first thing to recognize, if you take a look at your life, is why wouldn't you be depressed with stuff that's going on? So, okay, so you're depressed. Okay, you're normal. So now let's figure out what are some of the things that you can take off your plate. Because with depression, you can feel overwhelmed. One of the things that people will sometimes do with depression is they'll have a drink or a smoke or something to feel better. And those are depressants. So you're adding depression to depression. So that doesn't work. But sometimes just reaching out, looking in a mirror and saying, you know what, I really don't feel good. Let me figure this out. Let me take a break. If you can, go to a hotel from 8 to 4. That sounds like a great idea. It's a common experience. It's not a death knell. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It means you're human. And again, I'll check my site and make sure that I've got something up about some of the signs and symptoms. But the main thing is if you see any changes, you want to pay attention to the changes. It may not be depression. It might be medication that you're taking that you're having a reaction to. The other thing to recognize, just in terms of depression, is that children can and do get depressed.
Mhm.
And so don't assume that because you have a 12 or a 13 or a 9-year-old, they are and they're behaving and they're angry or they're belligerent or they're hostile and it's a different behavior. Those children, that child might be
Mhm.
depressed.
Mhm.
Don't try to self-diagnose. Don't try to diagnose your children, but pay attention to any changes because something has brought about the change.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'm going to put out a last call for any questions or comments to those who are watching, those in the audience. If you have any last comments or questions, please put them in the chat now and I will share them before we wrap up.
Marita, I'd just like to take a moment to thank you for the work that you do and that you've been doing because you've been so important in being a voice for so many people and helping people to share and trust in their own voices. So I thank you for you.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. I do want to say before we
Go ahead.
go, I just want to invite everybody to definitely check out Pamela's website. I invite you to visit my website, maritagolden.com, where you will find information on my books, my 2022 workshops, the literary consulting that I do, my blog. You can even order your copy of The Strong Black Woman directly from my website. And I do have to say that this is a book that I'm very proud of. And I think it's a book that's going to be great for those of you who work in organizations or institutions dealing with mental health, women's groups. And so if you want to get information about ordering bulk copies, you can also contact me through my website. But thank you, Diana, and thank you, Pamela. This was great.
Yes,
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
both. Yes, it has been awesome. You have received so much kudos in the comment section. So please go back and look. So many thank yous. Dr. Brewer, do you have any last words you want to share?
I would just like to remind people that saying no is a good thing because sometimes saying no to something or someone else is saying yes to yourself. And like they say on the airlines, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of another living soul.
Exactly. Put your own mask on first.
Absolutely. Well, maybe not a mask.
Not a mask.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. This is such an important conversation. I hope we can continue to have a conversation here at DC Public Library. I would love to have you both back. So just thank you again for being here with us. Thank you to everyone watching for joining us and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Diana.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Love yourself.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.